Well, welcome, everyone. We are so pleased to be here with Laura Putnam. She has amazing energy, amazing insights, and I think she's going to bring a new perspective to bring extra momentum and motivation to your life today. We're so happy to be with you, Laura.
Thanks so much for having me, Dee and Sean. Thank you both.
We're so fired up to have you, Laura. Dee, I gotta
Thank you.
I gotta brag on Laura for a second
Good,
here.
perfect.
The first time I met Laura was I actually didn't see her, I heard her because I remember, Laura, I was giving a web training, a seminar training, and the next room right next to me, the partition, so I couldn't see anything. Oh my gosh, the room was exploding. They were laughing. They were having the best. They were clapping. I'm like, who in the world is this person? And it was Laura Putnam giving the most amazing presentation. I'm like, I've got to meet this woman. I've got to meet her.
Thank you, Sean.
You're the absolute best. We're so happy to have you. So can I talk a little bit about your awesomeness, a little bit about you?
Yes, go for it.
I'm going to share your bio. So Laura Putnam is the author of the #1 Amazon hot new release in HR and personnel management, Workplace Wellness That Works. Get a copy. It is phenomenal. It's so well written. And she's also the CEO and founder of Motion Infusion, which is a leading well-being and learning provider. Her work has been covered on MSNBC, the New York Times, Fox News, US News and World Report, Entrepreneur, Business Insider, and NPR. Laura is, this is so cool, Dee. I don't know if you knew this. Laura is a former urban public high school teacher, international community organizer, dancer, gymnast. I think that's what they were doing in the other room. She was doing some dance moves or something like that. And, and now a movement builder, which we're going to talk about, and specifically in the world of health and well-being, with a mission to get people and organizations in motion. Laura is a frequent keynote speaker and has worked with a range of organizations from Fortune 500s to government agencies, academic institutes, and nonprofits. Laura is also a member of the Google Vitality Lab and also serves on the Health Stat Strategic Advisory Committee. And in addition, she teaches at Stanford University, is the recipient of the American Heart Association 2020 Impact Award, as well as the National Wellness Institute's Circle of Leadership Award. She's a graduate of Brown University and Stanford University, and Laura lives in San Francisco with her fiance. And dear friend, we are over the moon, so fired up to have you with us today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Laura, can I start off with probably the question that I should lead with? So, can we talk about exercise? Can we talk about,
yes.
Talk about what are the benefits and maybe some surprising benefits that people don't think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody knows that we need to exercise for our health, right? Doesn't mean that people necessarily do it, but we all know that it's good for our health. But I think that what people may not be aware of is also how good it is for our happiness, for our ability to think clearly, and for our ability to become our best selves. It even does remarkable things like when we exercise, it actually releases neurotransmitters that makes us more likely to want to connect with one another. So just, you hear all these stories anecdotally around, for example, a manager might start going on walking meetings with their team members, and lo and behold, they start to connect in a way that they didn't before. There's some science behind that. So very simply, when we move, we get healthier, we get happier, and we even get smarter.
I love that.
Healthy, happier, and smarter. That gets a little incentive, right?
You can't beat that, right?
We need it more than ever, Laura, right? Especially with the pandemic and everything that's been going on. Oh my gosh. How have you seen that, Laura? I mean, I'm curious. First of all, I mean, how are you doing with all of this, and how has this impacted your work in helping others to move more and sit less?
Well, I think we all had a moment, Sean, when the pandemic became real for us. the pandemic became real for me. For example, when I went to the grocery store and there was no toilet paper, there were no paper towels. The pandemic became real for me when I no longer had my husband. Not saying that that's happened to me, but there's been this whole range of how we have been impacted by the pandemic and all that has come with it, whether it's losing a job, losing a loved one, or just losing our day-to-day normal schedule. But what's been really interesting about the pandemic is there are some people who are exercising less because of the pandemic. It's kind of disrupted their normal routine. And then there are other people who are actually moving more. So it's kind of affected us differently.
Yeah. That's interesting. Really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have had this conversation, and I've heard you say this often. And you use the term movement, which is really interesting. I'd love to have you unpack that for us. But you talk about movement is one of our greatest gifts, which I love. And we all know we need to move. We all know that, right? Or, you speak around the world and doing so many webinar trainings and all that you do and writing. Why don't we do it?
I don't know. And this idea that movement is one of our greatest gifts, it was something that I kind of abstractly knew. And I was I was invited to speak to a group of therapists one time. And I thought, I'm speaking to a group of therapists. Let's start off with a childhood story. And I asked people to share a story from their childhood about movement. And so when I think about my own childhood, I think about, as a competitive gymnast growing up, but I just loved to play. We had a rope swing outside of our house. And every time we went to the beach, I was always tumbling on the beach. Any opportunity I could get, I was running and skipping and doing flips. And so we started off this session with that. And I hadn't noticed that one of the therapists there was in a wheelchair. And she had no movement from her neck down. And I started sweating as it came up to her. And then it was her turn. And in this beautiful voice with a Southern accent, she started describing how she loved to move as a child, and that she would run and skip and play. And then she went on to say, and then one day I felt a little bit of tingling in my toes, which moved into my feet and then up my ankles, up my legs. And so she slowly began to lose her capacity to move. And then she said, and today I have no movement from the neck down. So the only movement that I have today is I can move my head this way and I can move my head this way. And that little bit of movement is so sweet.
Wow.
It's one of our greatest gifts, truly, to be able to move.
Oh my goodness. You make me think about how much we take it for granted, right?
Yeah. We do.
As an athlete, as a gymnast, those times when you're just excelling, but then when you get an injury, when you are no longer able to perform at the level you were, or not able to actually even maybe walk properly, you really begin to think about how much we take our movement for granted.
Yeah, and it's not only inconvenient, but for someone like yourself or myself who have grown up as athletes, it's a form of expression. And I know I often felt, especially as a kid, that we're all trying to find, how do I fit into this social matrix? And I really felt like that, gymnastics and dance gave me so much confidence. And we know the research shows that, this is why it's so important for not only boys, but girls to be active as well, because it boosts confidence. And this was really an identity for me. And, I tie this a lot. I think about like what Martha Graham once said, who was a well-known pioneer in modern dance. And she once said, if I could say it, I wouldn't have to dance it. So I really felt like that for myself as well. If I could say it, I wouldn't have to do a flip to express that, or fly through the air, or move a certain way. That was a form of my expression and who I was and who I am today.
You can see it all over your face, and your motion infusion. And I feel like the energy around it is amazing. And I'm going to guess some people on the call were all inspired by that. And some people are going to share that passion. And many are going to say, that's so great for you, but I'm having to get out of bed. Like the stress of the night, the anxiety, I fall into the camp, not of one that is moving more, but possibly that's moving less. I know for me, I feel like when I get out the door, it's just a happy pill. Like my types of workouts are typically outside, even if the weather is inclement, I still enjoy getting out. I have 2 dogs, but I do find that no matter how heavy I may wake up on any given day, getting outside, I'm sure it's great for me physically, but the mental boost I get and the mood lift I get from getting out the door is huge. So I just want to say, for somebody kind of stuck in a rut, do you have a suggestion of even just an incremental way that they can begin to move in that direction that doesn't have to feel so overwhelming?
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point, it's really less about exercise. And Sean, I think this is something that you were really getting at. It's just about moving moving more and sitting less. The best position is the next position. So really thinking about just getting up out of your seat, just moving a little bit. To your point, Dee, just getting outside. There's all kinds of added benefits that we get when we go outside. For example, someone like myself, I sometimes struggle with sleep. And I know that there are a lot of other people who struggle with sleep. And there's some really interesting research showing that if we get exposure to natural light in the early part of the day, so that's what happens when we step outside and we move, that it actually helps to regulate our circadian rhythm so that we're able to sleep better at night. And so I think really taking a bigger picture around that. But I really also, I have to tell you, Dee, I'm not as much of a regular exerciser as I used to be. I'm kind of lazy in a way. I kind of need that, when I was on a team, there was all kinds of motivation to get me moving. But obviously now it's a little bit harder. So I also think about just getting outside and going and doing an errand, for example, and I move along the way. So it's no coincidence that the name of my company is Motion Infusion. It's about infusing motion, as you said, Dee, into everything that I do. And even if it's something as simple as I'm going to take a break from my work and get up and do the dishes, I'm getting a little bit of motion infusion, right? Or Blue Zones, they call it natural movement. But really that infused natural movement is what the goal really is.
I love that, Laura. Laura, I mean, you truly have been a trendsetter. And I know, especially in the workplace, telling people, you and I've had many conversations about this, that all movement matters, right? And I think, as a trainer, it used to be like, you and I've talked about the blah, 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 it's like, okay, 20 to 60 minutes of regular aerobic activity, do your regular resistance training, stretch every day. It's like, okay, yeah, want. We all know that, but we're not doing it. Like we're going backwards. We're going the wrong direction. So
I know.
You have done so much research in this area, and I'd love to have you talk about why we've got all this information. We've been talking about this for years and years and years. Why aren't we adopting these active lifestyles? Why is our health seeming to go in the wrong direction?
Yeah, I mean, I call this the knowing and doing gap. People know what to do, but they don't do it. So we could unpack this for days. So whether it's getting enough exercise, eating healthy foods, getting enough sleep, whatever it is that really, taking breaks, all these things that we need for our health and well-being, we all know. So if we just start with really the basics, you would be hard-pressed to find any smoker who doesn't know that smoking's bad for them, anyone who doesn't know that it's a good idea to get more exercise, anyone who doesn't know that it's a good idea to eat your broccoli, eat your vegetables. And yet, less than 3% of Americans put those 3 basic behaviors into practice every day.
Mhm.
And so I think it's easy to blame the individual and say it's your fault that you're not getting enough exercise. It's your fault that you're not eating healthy. It's your fault that you're not getting enough rest. And sure, there are things that we can all be doing as individuals, but I think we also need to step back and really take a look at just how much there are societal forces that are really driving us to our chairs, that are driving us to fast food, that are driving us to feel like we always have to be on and that we can't take a break. And so that's where I really have started to look into this paradox that while we are born to move, it's one of the best things that we can do for our bodies and our brains, we are literally told to sit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, I'll give you a few examples, which is look at any neighborhood today and how many neighborhoods are better designed for our cars than they are for us getting physically active. Or what's the first thing that we're teaching our kids in school? To sit and be still, right? Or, you know, that famous image that we've seen of people going to 24-hour fitness and there's a staircase and there's an escalator and nobody's on the staircase. Everybody's on the escalator to go to a fitness facility. I mean, that's, it can't get more extreme than that, right? Or what's the first thing that we say when somebody comes into our home or our office? Have a seat. So we need to be unpacking those societal forces, those kind of cultural forces. And it's something that scientists refer to as obesogenic environments, where the environment itself is really driving obesity.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Dee, I don't know for you, but that is so in many ways freeing, Laura, to know that, because I think a lot of folks we blame ourselves, right? There's the guilt, there's the shame that I know I need to do it, but I'm not doing it. But just understanding that it's kind of like the deck is stacked against you from the beginning, and just recognizing that is helpful. Have you found that, Laura, to be true?
It's so freeing. I really think, and again, I want to emphasize, it doesn't take away personal responsibility.
Right.
It doesn't take away from each of us becoming an agent of change and understanding the power of things like, you know, social contagion effect. It doesn't minimize that. But I think that we need to just to begin asking ourselves questions like, am I healthier, more able to become my best self, more able to move because of where I live or less so? Mm-hmm. Are there access, is there access to green space? Do I live in a city that regularly closes off streets, opening them only to pedestrians and cyclists, something that we're seeing more and more of in San Francisco, for example, especially during COVID, actually. Asking ourselves a question, am I healthier because of where I work or less so? Am I healthier because of the people I hang out with or less so? Am I healthier because of my boss or less so? And so it's kind of like these currents that we're all swimming in and thinking about, okay, the currents that I swim in, are they pushing me toward better health and well-being? Or am I kind of like a salmon having to swim upstream? And so at a minimum, I need to just kind of become more cognizant of those currents so that I can better navigate them.
That's really helpful. So cognitive of the currents so we can better navigate them.
Yeah.
We talked to Andrew Sykes during this summit, and he was talking about making things easy by changing our environment. So he was kind of saying the current is against us. And also Pilar Gerasimo that talked about being a healthy deviant, like our culture is against us. So I feel like some of these messages from people of different backgrounds are all kind of weaving together. So your message is very complimentary and inspiring, just to say, let's look at those currents. And then because of that, what do we do? One thing Andrew said is really look at your environment. How can you just make it easier to move? Whether it's setting, what we learned from Sean is set your alarm 8 times during the day and just do a 1 to 2 minute break. But if you did that 8 times, imagine by the end of the day that's 15 minutes without going to the gym. You might have done 10 squats each time. By the end of the day, or whether it is taking the stairs or walking a little farther, is one approach. Another that Pilar talked about is just doing small steps, these small steps that we can add some pauses in your day and making sure the things that you're integrating are going with the right type of current versus the one that's leading you the opposite way. So I really like just bringing more awareness to what are the currents maybe negatively impacting me with work, with COVID, with my home environment. What are some simple things I can do today with my environment and some small steps to kind of let the current be pointed in the direction that we really want to go. Super, super helpful.
Yeah, there's a researcher by the name of Sir Michael Marmot, and he described it is unreasonable to expect the individual to, quote, change their behaviors. We all know behavior change is the big buzzword and has been for a long time. When the social, political, cultural environments that surround us literally conspire against the individual from making the healthy choice. So just as Andrew spoke about, the more that we can collectively create environments that make it easy, and not only make it easy, but make it mindless. So that we don't even think about it. This is just a way of life. So if we look at, for example, these blue zones where people are not only living, but thriving into their hundreds, it's not because those people are that much more motivated than the rest of us, that they're that much smarter about setting up little systems like what you described, Sean. But it's just they happen to have been lucky enough to have been born into a blue zone. And so the currents there are just pushing them toward better health and well-being where they just don't even think about it. So that's where I'm really approaching this more and more is, yes, there are things that we can do individually and we can get a little bit smarter about it, but we also have to begin to look at this from a more collective perspective as well. What can we do? Not just what can I do, but what can we do?
That's so good. So Laura, can we unpack that for a second? So
yeah.
where do we start then? So do we start with me, my personal responsibility, or do we start with we? And I'm thinking about your colleague at Stanford University, Dr. BJ Fogg, this idea of looking at your environment, like look at your systems. What have you created? How have the habits been already formed? And then how do we make it tiny that's mighty, right? Little tiny baby steps. So can you kind of help us unpack that, like personally, and then also maybe as a collectively, how we can all, rise together?
Well, I think it's both. We need to be doing both. And, one of the things that I love about BJ Fogg is in addition to the fact that he also is associated with Stanford, but yay! But in addition to that, when he talks about, making it easy as possible, not relying on motivation. I think we've over-relied on, I just need to get more motivated. And there's so much research showing that motivation is actually a really limited resource. We can't just be relying on individual motivation. So I think that at a minimum, as an individual, a step that I think that we often overlook is just to really identify these kind of levels of cultural influence. So where I live, where I go, the people I hang out with, to what extent are they enabling me to become my best self, or me at my best, as I like to characterize it? And to what extent are they working against me? So becoming aware of that first, and then thinking about what do I do in response? So setting micro habits or tiny habits, as BJ Fogg likes to refer to it, that's a good thing that we can do in response. So again, it's both a me and a we. But, I think also kind of thinking about this, I often address this kind of team by team. And so it's a little bit in between. So how do we work together as a team so that we can really support each other so that it becomes a little bit easier? And certainly every workplace offers that because we're, generally speaking, all of us are part of a team.
Right. That's really good.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
guess
So what are, I'm sorry, what are some team-based practices as opposed to just individual-based practices? And I'm sorry, Dee, go ahead.
well, I think that's so helpful. Like if you're in a workplace that's encouraging that, but what about for the person working at home and they are a bit alone? I think I'd love to hear on any given day, and maybe hear from both of you, but we could start with Laura and then you, Sean, because I feel like both of you have mastered the currents going against you and the cultural currents, and somehow have paved a way for this motion infusion. It feels like a cornerstone of both of your lives. And I would just love to hear, how have you done that on a I basis, especially for those that are more alone in their day-to-day existence experience within the workplace? What does a typical day look for you of some of the things that have worked to crack the code of the current of navigating it in the right direction? Maybe Laura, you can share first, and then Sean, I'd love to hear from you too, because both of you have infused motion. I'm thinking in really creative ways, and I think we can benefit from that.
Well, I think the first is to reframe. Let's stop thinking about physical activity as exercise. Let's stop thinking about the health benefits of it, because then it becomes a chore. It really does. The minute I start thinking about, oh gosh, I need to go for a run, I need to lose that 5 pounds, it becomes a chore, as opposed to thinking about, oh, I get to go for a walk with my friend and we can catch up and I'm going to feel more energized and I'm going to be able to kind of focus on my work a little bit more. So reframe. And Sean, I'm going to steal from you here, asking the question, what's the very, very best form of exercise, right? It's whatever you love to do. And I think so often, people think, it's kind of like their smarter self, if you will, like, okay, now I'm going to get serious. I'm going to start moving more. I'm going to start exercising. And not only am I going to start exercising more, I need to do the right kind of exercise. What's the latest and greatest, best way to move? And I think that we get really tripped up on that, as opposed to just move. And whatever you love to do, that's awesome. If it's, Zumba, or if it's going and playing with your kids a little bit more, or taking your dog on a walk, all of those kinds of things count, if you will. And I would just say reframe, reframe, reframe. So Sean, how about you?
I love that. I think it's so, so good. I think about this often. I get this question often as well. And what I've discovered in my own life, Dee, is that make fitness connected. Connect with others, have a buddy, have someone that can support you. And I think Laura's alluding to this, obviously, in the workplace, having a team that's already moving together, you can kind of get into that current and move with them. But when you're at home, literally, like when you go for that walk, there's nothing wrong with FaceTiming somebody and having a conversation with them, obviously with COVID and everything else that's going on. But I don't think there's anything more powerful than having a buddy, having someone that can support you, encourage you, and say, let's do this together. Let's have fun together. So whether that's virtually or whether that's in person, and Laura, you alluded to this as well, make fitness purposeful, make it meaningful, make it the right ways, like Dr. Michelle Seeger talks about, right? We've for years, and I'm to blame for this in many ways as a trainer, we've told people to exercise for weight loss, exercise for their health. And while that's beneficial, it doesn't motivate anybody. It's too abstract. It's way down the road. How do we get them moving? And Laura, you and I have talked about this. We know physical motion dramatically impacts our emotion. Move to feel better. Move for, Laura said it, for happiness, for hope, for just that feeling of just feeling better. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to just feel better? Right?
Yeah. And I love Michelle Seeger's work, where she really talks about, the right why, and recasting it so that it's more, so it doesn't feel like such a chore, and instead it feels like a gift. And so, for example, one study that she conducted, which I think is so fascinating, 2 groups of women, one group who exercised to lose weight, so for the health benefits, as Sean, you're talking about. And then the other group exercised for more energy. It's more immediate, it's more fun, it's more inspiring. And big surprise, which group continued exercising over time? the one that was exercising for energy. And so the more we can reframe it in that regard, the why behind it, the better. One example that I often think about is Beethoven. So Beethoven apparently would start every day with going on a walk. And when he walked, he had a little pad of paper with him and a pen. And the walk was what he used to generate his ideas for the day. And so he would have this little pad of paper and this pen, and as the ideas would come, he'd write it down, and then he would take that and he'd go into the studio, and that was the foundation for the rest of his day, for his work. So again, a fabulous way to reframe what movement is all about.
That's so good, Laura. Oh my goodness. That's so connecting. Like, here's the biggest question: why exercise?
Yeah,
Like,
I want to do a popcorn with both of you. I want you to shoot it out, and like, we know it's good for our health. We know it can maximize our energy. Like, just popcorn a few other benefits, like the deeper reframe. Like, if we're trying to get motivated tomorrow morning and get out of bed because we have a reframe in our mind of just some of these beautiful benefits. It's just a little bit of movement, and it could be getting out for a walk or moving more throughout our day or parking farther away. But what I'm hearing is a big permission to just infuse this motion wherever I can. And it can really look quite different than the stereotypes, and do some popcorn benefits to me that are broader than just your health.
Okay, I'm going to start.
Okay.
Go.
Better decision making when you move.
Better relationships.
Yeah, more likely to connect.
Better relationship, to have a better, meaningful relationship. That's powerful.
And not only a relationship with the person that you're potentially walking with or moving with, but better relationship with your community. You go out, you move, you're more likely to connect with your community, so you feel more a part of your neighborhood. Over to you, Sean.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, so when I think about this, Laura, I think about from a spiritual perspective, you can connect spiritually. So meditation, mindfulness, prayer, and then the research behind those and the impact it can have on us. So what you said earlier, Laura, I think is so good, is this way to interject what you love about activity. But again, I think we have this association of sitting in the gym or moving in the gym, sweating. It's got to be no pain, no gain, that idea. I would encourage folks to think about all movement matters. I love that.
All movement matters. I love it.
You said it. I think I stole it from you. All movement matters. I really believe. So physically, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, Laura, can we say this? Can we say this? I've heard this by many, that there is no greater intervention, there is no greater practice than physical movement, activity, exercise on our physical and mental well-being. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And another unexpected benefit of movement, you heal faster. So it used to be, for example, that, if you had some kind of surgery, that you would be kept still for a long time in your bed. And now actually they're trying to get patients moving as quickly as possible because it speeds up the healing process, not only in the short term, but over time as well. Fascinating.
It's really good.
I mean, it's really staggering, the things that you guys said, from decision making to relationships, making it a moving meditation, injecting what you love, having it be a mood booster, having it improve your sleep. I mean, there's so many things that can bring incentive just to say, hey, I am going to infuse a little more movement in my day.
So, Laura, obviously, you think about benefits of movement, of physical activity and exercise, right? And you think about the time that we're in. What about stress management, right? What about the reducing stress or improving the ability to cope, or like you said, releasing feel-good brain chemicals like endorphins, increasing depression, anxiety, relaxation. Those are we don't think about that enough, how much it helps us to manage our stress, to be better in our mental well-being, right? It's huge. Huge.
Absolutely. There was a study conducted at Duke years ago showing that the benefits of exercise are similar to the benefits of going on Zoloft to help treat depression. So not only as a preventative measure, but even as a form of treatment, as you talked about, it can be so powerful.
I love that. I love that. Okay.
Kids are like providing so much incentive just to be able to put the tennis shoes on or literally our flip-flops and go for a walk in the grass and everything in between. And it's nice to have a fresh perspective. I think I'm taking away so many things from our time, but I think when you say to reframe, because people that are watching this summit, they're really wanting to revitalize their health, body, mind, and soul. And so to reframe our whole idea about infusing motion and really finding movement that we enjoy, weaving it in as many creative ways as we can is really quite a gift.
I love it.
Absolutely. And it's not only reframing, but re-engineering your own environment. So the more you can re-engineer your environment to make it easier to move, the better. So even something as simple as have your walking shoes right by the front door. You don't have to look for them. They're right there. You have your outfit beside it all ready to go. Make it as easy as possible for yourself. I have one friend, believe it or not, who she took this to such a level. She would go to bed at night in her running outfit. Okay, that's a little extreme.
Wow.
But she felt like she needed to do that to get herself out the door in the morning to run.
Well, you inspired me. Dee asked earlier, like for myself, like I'm standing. This is the way I work now. I work standing.
I'm standing too.
Right. So, but that's a simple thing that we can do just because, and Laura, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Like the average person, as far as being sedentary now, where is it? I've heard weird numbers like 18 hours a day, 21 hours a day that we are sedentary, that we're not moving. You're hearing similar
numbers? We're sitting about 10 hours a day, and then, so we're sitting more than we're sleeping at night. So add that all up together, and you're up at about 21 hours a day, 18, 20 hours a day. That's a lot of sitting that we're doing. So the more we can just kind of find ways to just infuse it into everything that we do. One thing I always think about every time I take a phone call, I stand up. I move my trash can a little bit further away so that every time I want to throw something, oh no, we lost her. Did we lose her?
Nope, I think she just went off video.
Okay, sorry.
Are you still with us? Okay, that scared
me.
Laura.
Oh, sorry, I stopped my flow because I thought we had lost you again. So I'll just pick that up. But just, we can do small things like move our trash can further away from our desk so that every time we need to throw something away, we can get up from our chair, or very simple things like every time we get a phone call, stand up when you get that phone call. Yeah. Use those little triggers.
Laura, you inspired me, honestly, years ago, and I was writing. So I went from being a personal trainer to now writing, and I'm sitting on my butt, writing about people getting off their butt, right? So, and you inspired me, just the cueing, the idea of a reminder. And so I stood up and did, a few 10 squats. And then I started thinking, oh my goodness, if I did this like every hour, the impact that I could have on just fit, and it could be stretching, it could be deep breathing, it could be anything. But the idea is giving yourself that reminder, that cue, your environment, like you had mentioned, is so good. So good. Okay. So I have two questions, Dee, and I'm really curious. Okay. So Laura, if you were to give people one next health step for their movement, would there be one in particular that you would say, okay, if you're going to start somewhere, I'd encourage you to take this first step? What would that be?
Yeah, I've been really inspired by James Levine's research around EAT, exercise activity thermogenesis, versus NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And what the research really shows is that it's not just about getting that one workout of the day. It's more beneficial if we move throughout the day. So if you're kind of more of that fidgety Fran as opposed to the workout Wendy, research shows that you're probably better off as the fidgety Fran. So just think less about exercise, especially if you're finding it hard to get yourself to do that. And just start to infuse more motion, more natural movement into your day-to-day schedule.
That's so good. So good. So good. Dee, I don't want to overstep. I have one more question, but I'll let you if you have a question for Laura.
No, I think it's great. It's just something super easy that we can apply. I feel like it's also a very gracious way. It takes the shame away from some of the intense pressure that our culture has caused us to be more sedentary. So there's no shame involved. If it's been hard in the past, it doesn't mean that your history determines your destiny. We can just start fresh right now, today. Do a shoulder roll, take a deep breath, think about just incorporating a little bit more movement today. That's a really warm invitation.
Wow.
Absolutely.
And Laura, you know what? Like 100 years ago, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation, would we? We wouldn't be having talking about moving more because we've moved all day, right? And things have changed. So we are so thankful for your light and for your voice and all that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. I'm encouraged. I think after this interview, I literally am putting on my tennis shoes and I'm going to take my puppies out to the beach.
Awesome.
Just a quick
Thank
spin
you
around
both so
like
much.
Evening, yeah. It's great to be with you. Thank you for giving us a different way to look at movement and really a gracious way just to spread a lot more emotion throughout each and every day. It's been a gift.
Thank you.
You're the best, Laura. Thank you, dear friend. Thank you for all you've done. Thanks for leading the charge. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you both for what you're doing as well. And thank you for having me.